Well, it is almost Thanksgiving week, and this sermon is really going to fit in and help some of you for Thanksgiving week, because how many of you in the room have family coming in for Thanksgiving? Let me see your hands, all right? How many of you are going somewhere to be with family? Let me see your hands. Very good. And right now, for those of you that are going to family, they're talking about you right now and saying, I hope that Tony behaves himself when he comes here this year, and your Aunt Martha and everyone else, because I want to talk to you today about forgiveness. And I want to talk to you about being responsible in that particular area and why it's so important for you. And we've been in a series called Response Able, and we started out a couple of weeks ago with our buddy Gavin Adams, who've invested in our staff all during 2022, which has been absolutely incredible for me, incredible for our staff. He was the campus pastor over at Woodstock City Church, and they did a fabulous job there. And Gavin's just been coming in, adding value to our team by making us think about things and see things through a different lens. And it's been great. And he kicked off our series, and he sat and he worked with our staff as we were working on this particular series that we wanted to do in November. We really work hard together on these kinds of things. And like next week's service is going to be totally different because next week we're only going to have one service. That's going to be at 9:30. So make sure that this crowd certainly remembers that. We'll be broadcasting it again, at 11 next week. But the actual physical service will be at 9:30. Then the week after that's going to be the first week of Christmas. And that's going to be a unique service as well. And we're going to be talking about Love Does that day. And we're going to have some of the people in whose organizations have been impacted through your generosity. And I guarantee you, some of you are going to have some new places that you're going to personally want to give to. And there'll be some pastors who would think, why in the world would you bring in groups of people who represent nonprofits, and maybe some of your people in your church start giving to them? Here's why. I believe that a rising tide lifts all the ships. That's just the bottom line. And when we encourage other organizations and we're there for them, when we're investing in them, all that does is turn around and bless us in a lot of miraculous ways. And so we can't outgive God. So on December the 4th, that's going to be a really, really great service. And it's just going to be jam-packed that day. So I want you to be here. So Gavin, when he started this series, Gavin started us out, we were in the Garden of Eden, right? And that was the Adam and Eve story. And the key points that came out of it were that our human nature is to blame other people. I mean, isn't that the truth? That's just our human nature. We want to be able to blame other people when something goes wrong in our life. And if we can point a finger, somehow it seems like that it makes us feel a little bit better about the situation. But the truth is, all it does is inflame the situation. It makes the situation worse. And so Gavin used the example in the Garden of Eden that when Eve had eaten the forbidden fruit, that she gave it to Adam, that Adam ate, and it set off a chain of events. Now, in that story, I love to say it this way because it's more memorable. So you've got Adam blaming Eve and blaming God, because he says to God, when God says, why did you do this? He said, because of the woman that you gave me. So the first person to ever get thrown under the proverbial bus in Scripture was God. Is that not a little bit encouraging to your spirit today? And so Adam blamed, Eve, and Eve blamed the serpent, and the serpent didn't have a leg to stand on, right? And so it's this whole blame game that goes on. And our greatest problem with blame is that we start blaming when we feel ashamed of something. And so we talked about dealing with shame and how we don't like to admit our shame. So then next week I came along and I took you to Psalms 51. And in Psalms 51 we talked about David. And we talked about when you have to own the things that you've done wrong. Because there's times in life that we all do something wrong. There's times in life that we make mistakes and we err against someone and in a situation, and we have to learn to own that. And that's what Psalms 51 was about. When David had had an affair with a woman named Bathsheba, God sent a prophet by the name of Nathan to confront him. And when Nathan confronted him about him being the one that God had an issue with, David immediately cried out and asked for God's forgiveness. And listen, without forgiveness, you just can't make life work. This morning in the early service, I didn't get to use this. And I really wish that I could have. But a writer by the name of David Wyeth recently said this in an article that I was reading. And he was talking about friendship. And have you ever noticed how easy it is to fracture a friendship, but how hard it is to build a friendship? But that you can fracture a friendship so easily. And so David Wyeth said, friendship is a mirror to presence and a testament to forgiveness. In other words, friendship, when you hold it up, it means that you're there for each other. You know, I've always said one of the greatest compliments that you can ever get from anyone is when someone looks at you and in that moment of deep honesty, they look at you and say, I want to thank you for being there. I want to thank you for being there. That means your face was in their space, that you showed up at a time that they really, really needed you. And so David Wyeth says, friendship is like a mirror to presence. We're there for each other. But he also said, it's a testament to forgiveness. And here's what he said about friendship. And I want you to think today, if maybe you have a friendship that's wounded right now. It could be with a relative. It could be with somebody at work. It could be even a friendship that you have with your child. And that somehow that friendship has been wounded. He said friendship not only helps us to see ourselves through another's eyes, that's why they're our friends, but it can be sustained over the years only with someone who has repeatedly forgiven us for our trespasses, and we must find inside of ourselves the ability to forgive them in turn. I started thinking about marriage there. And I started thinking about how this is so true. And that the most fundamental element of marriage to make it succeed is forgiveness. That you're willing to forgive each other. That you're willing to look beyond each other's faults because both parties have those faults. He said a friend, and I love the way he says this, a friend knows our difficulties and our shadows. A friend knows when you're struggling. A friend knows when maybe you're going through a dark place. And he said, not only do they know our difficulties and our shadows, but they remain in sight. Yesterday, I was reading to Robin an article. I love to read articles about, found treasure. And over in England, someone had found a ring that was a wedding ring, and it was beautiful. It was medieval, and it was these twisted braids of gold that had been put together, and it had an inverted diamond on top. In other words, it came up to a point, and inside the ring, there was an inscription that was written in French, and it said, I will hold your faith while you hold mine. And I thought, that's one of the most beautiful things to say about a marriage that you could ever say. Because there's times that you have to help hold that other person's faith. You know, the faith in the marriage, the faith in God, the faith that you're going to be able to work through things and things are going to get better. So a friend knows our difficulties and our shadows and remains in sight. A companion to our vulnerabilities more than our triumphs. When we are under strange illusions sometimes that we don't need the friend. An undercurrent of real friendship is a blessing, exactly because its elemental form is rediscovered again and again through these twins, understanding and mercy. You got to understand each other. You got to show mercy to each other. And he says, all friendships of any length are based on a continued and mutual forgiveness. Without tolerance and mercy, all friendships die. Wow, that was so powerful. Well, today, what I want to talk to you about in the time that I have remaining in the message is I want to talk to you about how do you forgive someone else when they've harmed you, when they've hurt you, when there's no question that what they did was intentional and what they did was wrong, and they left you out on the end of the limb and they're sawing it off and they're just going to let you fall through the air. What do you do with those situations? Well, in the idea of the blame and shame, making sure that you get forgiveness when you're wrong, now I want to talk to you about forgiving others when they're wrong. And here's who we blame more than anyone else for our problems and our situation. We blame God. God, why did you let that happen? God, why did that person get the promotion and I didn't get the promotion? Why is it, God, that family seems to be blessed and they live on Instagram and their life is just so perfect and our family is just utter chaos? And we blame God. We blame God when we go, God, why did my dad develop Alzheimer's? Why, God, did my spouse develop, dementia? God, why is my child going through cancer? I mean, God, why? And we have all of these questions where we go, why? And the why is not that we would ever get an answer that would ever satisfy us on this side of heaven. Probably would never. When we really say, God, why, what we want to do is argue with God. We're wanting to argue with Him. We want to bow our backs. We want to get angry. We want to get bitter. We want to get cold. We want to get cynical. We want to do all the things that's going to choke us to death emotionally. That's what we want to do. That is our human nature, to blame and to shame others that have hurt us. So here's my question today, and I'm going to use a quick character study to illustrate it. Instead of blaming God for it, whatever it is you're going through, whoever it is that harmed you, whoever it is that I'm telling you, bona fide, they were wrong, no doubt about it. What do you do instead of blaming God for it? Here's what I would suggest to you by the character study I'm going to share with you. Allow God to take responsibility for it, trusting God that there is a higher good that you don't see right now and that you may not see again on this side of heaven. So here's the story I want to be able to share with you. It's one of my favorite in the Bible. It's about a guy named Joseph. And this guy named Joseph is kind of his father's favorite son. And as his father's favorite son, the dad showed him a greater degree of love. He showed him a greater degree of belief in him. And because of it, it caused a sibling rivalry. It caused an issue among the brothers and the sisters. Now, just about every one of us that have a family can understand this, because I do want you to understand now, we're in the holidays. You're getting ready to go visit. They're getting ready to come visit. We're going to be around each other. And you wouldn't believe how many times people come to me and say, Ike, you would not believe how screwed up my family really is. And here's the deal. Everybody's family's messed up. I mean, go back and start out. Adam and Eve had 2 kids, Cain and Abel, and one of them killed the other. I mean, you start looking at it, and there's always these imperfections that are inside of our family. So you've got this one son, Joseph, and there's 12 in the family. There's 12 boys, and Joseph has a God-given dream. Now listen to me. It was a God-given dream. It was not his ego running amok. It was not him being, this narcissist that thinks that the whole world revolves around him. That's not true at all. He goes to his brothers and he goes, hey, I've had this dream and I can't figure it out. It was actually a 2-part dream, but I'm just going to use one part of it. He said, there were like these 12 sheaves of wheat that were standing up in a field. And all 11 of the other sheaves bowed down to this one sheaf, and I think the one sheaf represented me. Well, how would you respond? His brothers responded by, oh, so you think you're going to rule over us? You think you're better than us? You think that you're something that's so special? And so they started developing a hatred for him, not only because Joseph had this dream, but his father decided to manifest that dream by giving Joseph this sparkling coat, this multicolored tunic that he would wear. And every time he wore that tunic to his brothers, it said, you're not good enough. And they hated him for it. Let me tell you, when you have a dream, be careful of who you share the dream with. Be very, very careful who you share a dream with, because someone can crush your dream. If you share your dream prematurely and then you go through tough times, if you've shared it, people go, well, what happened to that dream you had? Thought you were going to do this, thought you were going to do that. How come that didn't work out? And all of a sudden, you can have people just really pushing you down, because inherently, most people do not like dreamers. Because when someone has a dream that fuels them with passion and other people do not have a similar dream, they can become angry and they can become jealous of what you have. That's what happened with Joseph. So his brothers have gone off to work in a different place. And so Joseph travels to that place. When they get there, they said, your brothers are not here. They're on their way to Panama City Beach, Florida. How do you know that, Ike? Because the brothers were in a place called Dothan. I know where Dothan is at, all right? And so your brothers have gone down to Dothan. And so Joseph heads out to Dothan. When he's still a ways away from them, the brothers look up, and here comes Joseph. And you know what he was wearing? That multicolored tunic. And they said to themselves, let's take care of this dreamer. Let's get rid of him now. He's coming out here to tell us what to do. He's been hanging out with Dad. Let's just get rid of him. And so they decided to destroy the dreamer. But what they didn't understand was you can't destroy God's dream. You can't destroy the dream that God has. I think about a person like Martin Luther King Jr. that had a dream. And yeah, there was a gunman that shot him down, but it didn't destroy the dream. The dream continues to live, the dream of racial equality, the dream that people would have the same opportunity as one another and not be judged on the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That was a tremendous dream. So for Joseph, we're going to destroy the dreamer. So they decided what they were going to do was they were going to kill him, they were going to take him, they were going to throw him down in a pit where wild animals would have been trapped, and they're just going to say, evidently, a wild animal killed them. But there was a brother who decided to intervene. And he said to him, let's don't kill him. When we put him down in the pit, let's don't kill him. And there was going to be a better option that was going to come along. Now, you'll be able to remember this brother's name from now on because of his heroic action. God named a sandwich after him, and it's called a Reuben. And so the next time you go to a delicatessen, you ask for the Reuben, all right? Sauerkraut and corned beef, they're great. And so Reuben said, let's not kill him. So what they do is he's down in the pit. Well, lo and behold, along comes a band of Midianite traders. They're on their way to Egypt. The brothers go, let's sell him as a slave. Pull him up out of the pit and sell him as a slave. Now I want you to look at Joseph's trajectory. He goes from being his father's favorite to being hated by his brothers, and his dad's going to be told that he died, and they're going to take back his tunic, and they're going to have blood on it and tell the father that he's gone. And then he's going to be sold as a slave to these traders who are going to take him to Egypt. And then he's going to be sold to a man named Potiphar, who was a very powerful man, a very wealthy man. And of course, Joseph comes into his home, does great things. And I'll even read you a verse about what he thought about Joseph. But then his wife accuses Joseph of sexual assault. And he believes his wife. And now Joseph is thrown into prison. When you look at Joseph's life, it looks like everything is going wrong. Now I want you to be honest. Some of y'all right now are thinking, it sounds a lot like my life. Ike, there's a lot of stuff going wrong in my life right now. Inflation is killing us. I mean, we're hurting financially. And Ike, we're hurting emotionally. You realize what the pandemic has done? You realize the suicide levels where they are right now? You realize the overdoses that are happening through fentanyl and opiates and all of these other things? We're at the highest level of alert with these things. There are so many things happening in people's families right now, and everybody feels like they're under attack. But here's what I want you to know about Joseph. I need to come back and preach a series again on Joseph. I think I did so in like 2015. But here's something I want you to notice about Joseph. God places a hedge of protection around Joseph. You go, wait a minute. You just told me all the bad things that happened in the life of Joseph. Joseph is about 17 years old when this all starts happening to him. 17. He's going to, at 40 years old, from 17 to 40 years old, he's going to go from this mess and being in prison to being the second-ranking person in all of Egypt. Would you accept that fast track if you were offered it? You become the second most powerful person in the United States of America, and you would do it from the time you were 17 till the time you were 40. How did that happen? Well, there's this term that keeps getting used in Genesis chapter 39 in verses 2 and 3. The Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man. The Lord was with Joseph. You keep hearing it over and over. So here's the thing. God places this hedge of protection around Joseph because he's committed to God's plan in his life. And instead of hating his brothers, instead of just pondering every moment about how can I ever get revenge on my brothers, he purposes in his mind that God is with him in the middle of his mess. So what really looks bad in the story is good, and what looks wrong is really right, and what looked out of control was totally within the control of God. And Joseph learned this huge lesson that we all have to learn how to deal with. Just because we do the right thing does not mean things turn out right. I look over and see Coach Shack over here. He's my buddy. I've watched Coach Shack do the right thing. I've seen it cost him ball games. Coach Shack taught me a great principle one time. We had a really great quarterback. He got in trouble on a Friday. We were playing a ball game that night. That ball game is going to determine whether or not we get a chance to play for the entire region championship. That's starting quarterback. He did something wrong. I get the ball field. Coach Shack says, pray for us. This particular person's not going to be playing. I go, what in the world? And he explains the situation. I, being the godly man I am, said, Coach, are we sure we want to do that? Are we sure we want to do the right thing here? Am I being honest, Coach? I'm being honest. Are we sure we want to do that? And he said something I've never forgotten. I will not let one player rob me of my whole team. I don't care how talented they are. We had a little skinny sophomore who was a backup. He came over to Steve Crowley, who was our community pastor at the time. He came over to us. He said, guys, y'all got to pray. I'm starting tonight. And I mean, his eyes were as big as saucers, and he's like, man, I don't think I was ready for this. Well, immediately, Steve and I began to lie to him, going, absolutely, you're ready for this moment. Yeah, we believed in him, and first pass he threw was a little hitch pass, went for 80 yards, touchdown. Won that ball game, won that region. Coach didn't lose his team. By the way, that skinny little guy is now playing for the 49ers, right? And Jarek McKinnon. And I still keep in touch with Jarek. And great kid, great attitude. You know what I learned? You have to have boundaries. That night, things turned out right. But I have a friend that I could tell you about that was asked to cook the books at a very large company, and he said no. And I can remember looking at him. He's still one of the godliest, most wonderful guys I've ever known. West Point guy. I looked at him and I said, I wish so bad I could tell you that when you do the right thing, everything always turns out right. I can't tell you that, but here's what I know. In the great scheme of things, and there's a great scheme, there is a God who rewards us. And it's not just a reward on this earth. There's eternal implications to choices that we make. Eternal implications. So here's Joseph in that situation. When he was given that coat, I mean, think about this. You know, when Joseph arrived in Egypt, he no longer had his coat of many colors. It was gone. And he may have lost his coat, but here's the deal. He didn't lose his character. He lost the coat, but he didn't lose his character. The coat that Jacob, the father of these 12 boys, you know, Jacob is named Israel, the father of the nation. 12 tribes of Israel are his 12 boys. That's what was hanging here in the balance. It was a symbol of his position in the family. See, it marked him as an overseer. It meant that when Jacob departed this earth, that Joseph was to be the head of the family. It marked him as the one in charge of everything. It marked him as a man of authority. But here's what we learn. Joseph's authority did not come from a robe. It didn't come from some piece of cloth that had been stitched together. Joseph's authority came from his character. Can I tell you the greatest lesson I've ever learned about character? It is a lot easier kept than it ever is regained. Keep your character. Be a person of integrity. I love the word integrity because it comes from a Latin root word, integer, which means one, a oneness, a wholeness. Be the same thing. For me, be the same guy that you are in the pulpit when you get home with your wife. Don't act all nicey up here and tell everybody how wonderful your wife is and then get home and act like a complete and total jerk. That doesn't send a very good message. Don't tell everybody how to raise their kids and then you're never there for yours because you're out busy doing God's work everywhere. I tried to have integrity. Man, I took my kids to school nearly every day. Unfortunately, we all like Chick-fil-A, and I know Ms. Shackelford, as a principal, you won't appreciate this, but we were tardy more than any family in Fayette County history of going to school. Because I loved spending time with my kids. Joseph was godly. He responded to his father in the right way. He did all of those things. But when Joseph lost his coat, he didn't lose anything that made him a great man. Kept his integrity. He kept his character. Because his greatness didn't come from clothes on his body, but it was the character within his heart. And that's what I want you to understand. And when he came to Egypt, I'm trying to speed this up. When he came to Egypt, he could have taken several paths. Think about it. He's sold into slavery. He goes into Potiphar's house, and Potiphar was a very rich man. They were a polytheistic culture, meaning they believed in multiple gods. They worshiped cats, all kinds of unusual things. You know, they believed in the God of sun and all these different things and all the stars and all this stuff. That's what they believed in. Joseph could have easily adopted their ways and customs to get in a little quicker, but he didn't. He could have abandoned his God and embraced all that polytheistic culture. But Joseph stayed the course. You see, he was purchased by Potiphar, but Joseph belonged to God. He already made up his mind how things would be in his life. So here's the question. Do you know who or what owns you? Now, my buddy Mark Merrow's down here. He knows I'm a wrestling fan. One of my favorites, Mark, besides you, used to be Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. You know what Ted DiBiase's stick was? Every man has their price. Every man has their price. But you know, you look at Joseph, he doesn't have a price. How did he do this? Here's the deal. If you make up your mind ahead of time, before temptations and bad situations occur, then in the moment, you're not having to make a decision. You're simply managing a choice you've already made. I'm not going to bend my morals. I'm not going to do a dishonest thing. I'm not going to do these things. So see, it made no difference to Joseph whether he was in his father's house or whether he was down there in that pit or whether he was with those slave traders, whether he was in the house of his master with his wife coming on to him, or whether he was in the bottom of a dungeon. Joseph purposed in his heart, I'm always going to do the right thing, and that's what he did. See, that's what a person of integrity does, regardless of the situations they find themselves. I wish to God that politicians could learn this. When they make all the promises, I'm talking Republicans, I'm talking Democrats, I'm talking Libertarians, I'm even talking Presbyterians. I just wish that when somebody made promises, that then when they get to Washington and they get so caught up in the power and the only thing that counts is getting elected the next time, that you forget about what you promised that got you there this time, what a difference it could make in our country. And that we'd work together and be together. This whole thing of forgiveness I'm talking to you about today is so bizarre. I wish I had more time. Tim Keller has just written a new book on this. Great pastor, great preacher. He said that the most interesting thing is happening right now in our country. That forgiveness is being put on trial against justice. Hear me. Right now, justice is the hot word. We want justice for everyone. We want justice. We want justice in this situation. We want justice. We want justice. We want justice. Sometimes justice has to bow down to forgiveness if the person is impacting the most is going to keep their sanity. See, when someone's done something wrong to you, Joseph's brothers did horrible things to him. He could have let revenge drive him crazy. You say, well, preacher, how do you know that he wasn't revengeful? Oh, you may have not read this whole story. So one day Joseph looks up. He's become the second leading ruler in Egypt. He's been down there since he was 17, and now he's about 40 years old. And he looks up one day, and lo and behold, there are his brothers. Now let me ask you, what would you do? They didn't recognize Joseph because Joseph now, he talked like an Egyptian, and he dressed like an Egyptian, he looked like the Egyptians, he walked like an Egyptian. I mean, by then you knew that was coming. You had to know that was coming. By now, they're standing there and Joseph is assessing the situation. You ever done that old thing where you go, it doesn't really bother me. It doesn't really bother me. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. It eats you up. If you don't deal with it, it can eat you up. Joseph went to his room. He didn't reveal who he was. I wished I had time to do the whole story. He goes to his room and he cries so loud. So interesting the way this is phrased. It says that his slaves heard him and Pharaoh heard of it. He was in so much emotional pain. Now the time has come. You can pay them back. You can have them killed just like that. And you know why they're there? Because there's a famine in Israel. Remember what the original dream was? I don't understand my dream. There were these 12 stalks of wheat, food. And 11 were bowed down. But there was only one standing. Now the dream has come true. Now then, what do you do when you're the most powerful person in the room? How do you handle it? Do you seek revenge? Do you tear them up? When Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, he goes, hey, I'm Joseph, the brother that you sold into slavery. The brothers were extremely intelligent. They looked at each other and went, this ain't good. And Joseph looks at him, whoo, you talk about truth bomb? He looks at him and goes, you meant it for evil. God meant it for good. You remember what I told you that you need to do? Instead of blaming God for it, allow God to take responsibility for it, whatever you were put through, trusting that with God, there is a higher good that comes from it. Whew. Out preach right there. Or as preachers say, that dog will hunt. It really will. Apply it in your life.